We will call to order. This is the meeting of the Des Moines Waterworks Board of Trustees, January 28th, 2020. So we'll start under our agenda with the consent agenda. We take up these items unless someone specifically wants to call something out. Ted, if you would take a few minutes and tell us if there's anything in here that you'd like to bring our attention.
A couple things I would point to. Every month we have this summary of CEO approved expenditures in excess of $20,000. Typically there are none. This month there is one. And it was a $64,500 expense that was for a leak that we had to repair on a transmission line. Something our crews couldn't do. We got the prices from contractors. That was the best price, and we had them repair that leak. So one expense there, just to call your attention to, because we usually don't have any of those. The others, items E and F, although they are on the consent agenda annually in January, they're not there each month. So I just call your attention to the fact that the reserve fund investment policy is here for your approval today, as well as the depositories for Des Moines Waterworks funds, both on the consent agenda this month.
And Ted, if I could add, the item above 20,000 that's in the materials was a competitive quotation item, which will be noted as such in the minutes pursuant to Chapter 26.
Very good. Thank you.
I'll entertain a motion, and then if there's any questions.
I move in the consent agenda.
Second. Are there any questions for Ted about any of the items?
Just a quick question about the investment. So is that managed internally, or do we work with anybody outside to help with?
I'll let Peggy answer that for us.
Both. We actually utilize it's called BTC, which is Bankers Trust Capital Management, and they are an actual separate entity but related to Bankers Trust. So they actually handle, the purchasing, et cetera, within our investment policy. I actually, give them criteria as far as how long out we want it invested, et cetera. So kind of a cooperative, I guess I would describe it.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Been moved and seconded that we approve the consent agenda. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Second is our public comment period, and I understand we have a guest who'd like to speak with us.
Thank you. I've enjoyed sitting where you are now sitting years ago, and I've come to respect always the responsibility of the Des Moines Waterworks and the responsibility of the trustees. I am to talk about one specific idea, proposal that was raised during our campaign for mayor. and it is the need for a more regional planning process, not to be confused with your decisions on a regional distribution management system. Those are two separate ones, and I know you are proceeding with that latter. And so I want to be clear that this was, and the reason I'm here is because this to me is probably the most important of all policies you can consider. And it got some consideration during the campaign. Candidates from the mayor to council people talked about it, but it got confused in the process of the election. And one of the responsibilities that I think any candidate has, win or lose, is to at least attempt to keep the chatter away from the real substance of what we were talking about. What I wanted to do, and this is expressed, I think, pretty evenly in the first two paragraphs, is that I know everyone is interested in keeping the legacy of Bill Stowe moving forward. And the legacy that he has really was related to the responsibility of looking at water quality from its source. And the source is not just from the water you pull it out here in your river, but all the way up the Raccoon River Basin. And the watershed basin is really your source. That comes from tributaries from numerous rivers, and also from groundwater and non-point sources. And the lawsuit that you were in was related to 3 counties way up north. And the difficulty in trying to get a conversation between Des Moines and Polk County and any rural county is nearly impossible. You have to go to court to get that discussion. It has been silent since your withdrawal of your suit, and I think it needs to be elevated. And I think the only way really to elevate it is not through the political process, but through what is laying in front of you with watershed management agencies. And the legislature created watershed management in 2010. They limited it in scope. So, and right now there are numerous watershed management agencies in Polk County and in the Raccoon watershed basin itself. What I'm asking is that you take the lead and convene a process, convene a meeting to create a process that would bring in the 17 counties. And this list gets long, and it's on the second page. And it gets long for a reason. Not only is it 17 counties, but it also includes all the municipalities that are your customers. It includes the municipalities that are not your customers. It includes the county soil and water commissioners, which are elected officials. And there are 5 per county. It involves the county conservation commissions, the drainage districts, local water management authorities, municipal water treatment agencies, the State Department of Natural Resources, the State Department of Health, and the nonprofit conservation associations and advocates. It is a huge list. One that should not really dissuade you from looking at this, but one in which gives you the really compliment that there's really only a very few number of agencies and authorities that have this opportunity. And that's the challenge I bring to you. I don't foresee that this is something that will happen immediately, but I do expect and challenge that you could lay the groundwork immediately. You got to find whether or not the tempest is there for you, whether or not the temperament is there, whether or not there's a commitment from everybody to look beyond the individual political jurisdictions that we have and look at the real water quality. Because it's not just nitrates that we're talking about. It's the microcontaminants, it's the waste management, it's the industrial waste. It's everything that we are not talking about. And it falls on you. That's why I'm here. I could go to the city council. I could go to the Polk County Board of Supervisors. But you have that overreaching responsibility that almost demands that you take the lead. Whether or not you keep the lead, you don't have to do it. You can pass that baton on to something. Watershed management authorities are established by statute, but they're limited in how big they could be. But you have 28E agreements that can pull you together, not to be a watershed management authority, but a 28E agreement to be a planning agency. That's why what I'm recommending is that you become a planning agency, and you create a planning agency to start the discussion and keep it going. If we leave it to our politicians, we'll fall into the same kind of rut that we had during this last campaign. And none of us is interested in that. And I think you're in the best position to kind of carry this forward. So now I don't have staff, and you may give me credit, but I'm not taking credit for the media being here. So that's kind of laid on politicians, and I have been known to do that. I'm frightened by it. But I want this discussion to come from your level first. This work is about as far as I can take it. I am not the expert, but I am schooled in how to create public policy. We did this on some other major issues, healthcare reform, that no one thought we could do anything, and yet as a result of some very good political people and policy initiatives and a lot of interested citizens, the legislature several years ago created a process in which 30,000 new kids got health care, something that people thought was impossible because of all the political barriers. It is possible to do something big and bold, and so that's the challenge I give to you.
Thank you. I guess the first thing is, and I'll do this for the media, that this is a public comment. We're not making any decisions. This is not on an agenda item, so I don't think we're in any
No, I understand that.
position to respond. But the second thing I'd like to say, and I think you didn't intend to say that, but again, I just want to be very clear that the regionalization that we're talking about is not on distribution management, but rather regionalization of the water production facilities. So I wanted to clarify that. And with those two things, I think if there are questions that other members have, I think that now is the time.
Jack, you and I, thanks for coming. You and I have talked about this vexing problem for a while, and I mean, the politics of it is difficult to overcome. As you know, thanks to Bill Stowe, we did enter that lawsuit and charged up that hill, if you will, for a while on our own, because we felt at the time, our one avenue to do something. There's a lawsuit pending now by others with CCI and Food and Water Watch that's different than ours, but it's the same fight. I bring this up because the politics of this are complicated. For us to convene a meeting like you suggest, which I'm for, by the way, maybe we are the right entity to do something like that. And I think we are doing that when we pursue our conversations with our potential regional partners. As I've said over and over again, the number one goal on those regionalization discussions is protecting the natural resource of water. And this is the very thing you're talking about. How do we plan together? We start building plants in every corner of this region, we're going to deplete very easily depletable resource. But the problem that we have, and part of it's, because we did fight the lawsuit that we fought, is that we get opposition sometimes from strange corners on this topic. We were fought tooth and nail by the Iowa Farm Bureau during our lawsuit. And I think they have some influence over some of these potential partners that are on your list. I bring that up. I think you've worked with Christine Hensley quite a bit, and Christine Hensley fought us very hard on that lawsuit. And the reason I bring that up is not to open old wounds, but actually to turn a little bit back on you and anybody else who's listening, and that is, we need help. I mean, we can't just convene a meeting on our own because we're seen as a political entity because of our past actions. And I'd like you and others to give some thought about how do we lessen that political impact that we've had. We filed an amicus brief in the CCI case with the Supreme Court. And there's a lot of fear that even our filing an amicus brief that talks about our past lawsuit somehow is going to infuriate some of these folks that we're having the regional conversations with. I mean, to me, that's so simple. We're talking about the fight that we all believed in and we had, but there was some unwillingness to even file the amicus brief because it could have a negative impact on other discussions we're having. So I'm just turning a little bit back on you, and I welcome to continue that conversation. How do we bring those people together and lessen that somewhat, that animosity that's in the room?
Well, if you're asking me to come back at a private meeting or a meeting, I could bring Christine Hensley, county commissioners from Calhoun or SAC, advocates that were on the other side of you, and advocates who were on the same side.
Right.
I mean, that's the business I was in as a politician, as a legislator.
Right.
And that's exactly who you reach out to. Because no one's gonna say no to wanting to have better water. No one will say no to the ability of coming and being asked of their ideas on how to do that. They may say no about something later.
Right.
But I think the sense that because you were an opponent of theirs, because you had opposition, because you are so clear on what your goal and mission is, that's respected.
Right.
And that's why I think you have that authority, you have that leverage. I don't think the Des Moines City Council does. I don't think the Board of Supervisors does. I don't think the West Des Moines City Council does, or Ankeny, or Urbandale, or any of the other, people who are looking for production. But I think that if you elevate it to water quality, and that's flood control as well, then I know people respect it. And then it's a sense of, listen, who can we reach? What will that, it's like John Norwood, Polk County Soil Conservation Commission. He's an elected official. He's very passionate about this. He could probably bring a half a dozen of his commissioners in the watershed to a meeting.
Right.
That would have some ideas. And so then you start building that coalition, you start building that base. And the nice thing about that, Graham, is that it gets people away from that other mission of yours, of production.
Right.
Okay? And that's also your responsibility. But you can't do one without the other, I believe.
I think where people get nervous, where some of these parties will get nervous is what we saw in our lawsuit, and what I'm just speaking for myself today, and not the rest of the board or any of the winners. What we saw in that lawsuit, and I continue to seek, is regulation, right? We want some sort of reasonable regulation upstream to protect our waterways and our water source. That gets some of those people very nervous. And again, you and I aren't going to solve this today. I'll keep talking. I welcome those conversations because we need to go into these conversations understanding where each side is going to come from, because the goal is to find the common ground. I'm all for it.
So regulation, the fear that they have is because we've approached this the same way over and over again. I was part of a group of 5 legislators in 1987 that wrote the Groundwater Protection Act. And when we passed it, we were all targeted by the chemical industry for defeat. We all were reelected. And a year later, we were all given awards by the same agricultural chemical industry. Why? Because we didn't regulate them. They became partners with us. They had a lot to say about the education of application of agricultural chemicals, about how we could help them, how we could how we could make them better stewards. But at the same time, we weren't threatening to, and the law was approached that way. That's why I think, again, we just have to challenge the conventional wisdom. And I'd be glad to come back and work through that with you if that's what you wish.
The other thing I wanted to say is that, and this goes to timing, we've just spent several years on the other regionalization plan and a tremendous amount of time with our customers and with elected officials and with the other communities. And we certainly hope that we're getting to the point where we will know what we're doing with that. But right now, I think that's a priority for us, seeing that thing to some kind of culmination. So I'm not sure we want to start some other big thing before we understand what's going on there. I think that's been a tremendous effort and has really helped us to establish relationships, good, strong relationships, and to begin to educate on this issue. I think many of us believe that if we go into that regionalization structure, that others will understand some of the challenges that we have experienced here, that maybe they don't understand as our customers, but they would understand if they were part of an entity that needed to clean up.
And I appreciate that. Again, I'm not here asking for your permission, because we have other ways of doing this. I'm here because you are the right place to start.
Well, and I think what we're doing in our regionalization planning now is a collaborative thing, and it's building coalition. I think this is the same. I think maybe one can springboard into the other, and they can parallel each other.
And I've appreciated the meetings you and I had with Laura day before, so that's where it begins. Well, that was a very long 5 minutes, so I appreciate it.
Jack, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks for doing that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, with that, we will move into the action items part of our agenda. If I can figure out which one is here. This one, right? I know. Acceptance of the 2019 Polk County Water Main Replacement Contract number.
Yes, this is actually a project that was just finished up last year, a small project of Polk County water main replacement. One small change order, just over 1% change, but the work is done. And the mains are in service, and we would recommend that the board accept Polk County 2019 Polk County Water Main Replacement Contract 2.
I'd like a motion to accept 2019 Polk County Water Main Replacement Contract 2 completed by On Track Construction LLC in the amount of $624,678.03.
So moved.
Seconded.
It's been moved and seconded. Are there any questions for Ted? For Ted? Been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. The next item is the request authorization to issue purchase order for replacement of the RO membranes for Saylorville Water Treatment Plant.
Yes, Vern Rash, our engineering department, has done a nice job of kind of outlining the membrane life cycle history at the Saylorville treatment plant. This is the RO membranes, which is kind of the second stage, the softening and nitrate removal stage of that process up there. The plant was commissioned in 2010. We started using it in 2011. We replaced all the membranes in 2016, and then we are now trying to spread out that replacement. We replaced one set. There are 3 RO trains there right now. We replaced one set in late 18, one in the middle of 19, in July of 19, and now this one early in 20 to kind of give it on a once per year replacement cycle. Membranes are a wear part, if you will. They have a limited life and then they need to be replaced. We got very good bids. There was a question about why we don't go direct to Dow and buy the Dow membranes from Dow, but we did reach out to them and they said, well, for this small of a quantity, we would ask that you work through one of the many vendors that we have available, which is what we did. We visited with 4, we got prices, and we will purchase these are prices for identical membranes. We will purchase those obviously from the low bidder, and we would recommend authorization.
Like a motion to authorize staff to issue a purchase order in the amount of $136,710 to Consolidated Water Solutions for the purchase of replacement reverse osmosis membranes with a 3-year prorated warranty for the Saylorville water treatment plant.
So moved.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Are any additional questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? 3C, request authorization for CEO and general manager to execute agreement for 2020 Fluor Drive median maintenance.
Another nice outline here from Vernon Rash in the engineering department. This project, Fluid Drive median maintenance, actually went to planning this month, and Jessica Burnett gave a nice overview of what we've done historically there and what we want to do going forward. What we have before us here today is a proposal to contract out the actual maintenance, the planting, the pruning, the mowing, the watering on Fluid Drive. We've had concerns over time about safety out there. We've worked on those quite a little bit, but ultimately we've decided to try this and see if contracting is a good fit. Interestingly enough, we have 3 bids and a wide spread in those bids, as you can see. The low bid is $64,000. We have a $143,000 bid and an $823,000 bid. Having done this for 20 years in-house, we have a pretty good sense of what it costs, and we're pretty comfortable that the high bid is more cost than we would expect in there.
I would hope.
Yeah. We haven't spent anywhere near that in our experience. The middle bid is also a little high, especially if you add the traffic control higher than we would have expected. Granted, the low bid is a little lower, but we visited with that contractor. They do mowing for us at all of our remote sites and have done so for many years. They're confident that they can do the work and are excited to take this on and feel that they have the money in there to complete the work successfully. And so we would recommend that the board authorize award of the contract to All Do It LLC.
Like a motion to authorize CEO and general manager to execute an independent contractor agreement with I'll Do It LLC in the amount of $64,765 for the 2020 Fluor Drive median maintenance project.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Are there questions, additional
Yeah.
questions?
What are we doing for safety for this group? I mean, I can appreciate, I'm so pleased that we have an alternative so that our employees are safe, but I also don't want to put anyone else in a situation like our employees have been in, that they are first responders to, a terrible accident or anything else. So, what are we doing differently?
Great question, and we're doing a number of things. To start with, and this isn't what we're doing differently, although we are doing some things differently, but to start with, Jessica and her folks have 20 years of experience out there of what it takes and how to do things as safely as possible, including very specific traffic control plans for every median and procedures for moving work zones and all kinds of different things that we have learned over our 20 years of experience, and we've shared that, and we'll share that on an ongoing basis with the contractor. The other thing that we've done that I think is important here is that we've focused all of their work on weekends. We've asked them to spend the majority of their time on weekend days when there isn't as much traffic on Fluid Drive. We have tried to do some of our plantings on weekends, and we find that there is less traffic and less of a safety concern. But we have other things we have to do. We can't just have the grounds folks, we have such a small grounds crew, 6 or 7 people. You can't just have them work every weekend and not be here, whereas a contractor can make that kind of a commitment to work on weekends. So I would say that's the big thing, is that we would ask them to focus on working weekends. Jessica, do you have anything that you could add to that from a safety perspective?
The only other thing, it's not really safety, but we, over the years, developed highly detailed maintenance, so we did multiple things at the same time. For example, when we planted, we weeded, we did chemical applications, so we had less of a footprint out there, less combined work together. And that's a maintenance schedule we passed on to the contractor, and I'll be working closely with them. So they're not out there every single day trying to do different tasks.
And with the new construction, we do have irrigation, is that correct, in all of the ranches?
There will be irrigation installed as they reconstruct in each of those areas. And then what we understand is there is a commitment to even install irrigation in areas where they're not rebuilding the road. But to take that extra step and get to a point where ultimately there will be irrigation in all of them.
Will those irrigation fields have meters?
They will have meters, but they will be free water to the city.
Well, meter them so we'll know what the usage is.
Exactly, that's correct.
So does their cost estimate include the traffic control? And is it the traffic control that we've traditionally used to the same extent?
Yes.
Yes, we shared that information with them and they included it in their bid.
Will you talk a little bit, Ted, about how this impacts our workforce? I mean, are we going to employ fewer people now? Or?
No, is the answer. And one of the things that we had facing us, Graham, in the year to come is maintenance of all of the areas that have been improved recently in the park. And as you know, there's more intensive maintenance. We work with the Park Foundation to fund that additional maintenance. But as it turns out, we spend about 2,000 hours of maintenance out on Fleur Drive each year. We anticipate spending about 2,000 hours of maintenance time within the improved areas of the park. So we feel like that's a pretty close balance and we don't have any intention of reducing staff or having fewer people. They're just going to be doing different things.
I mean, this is a vexing problem. I mean, you know, I think all of us at this table are proud to have the skilled workforce that we have at Des Moines Waterworks.
Indeed.
And, you know, the problem with this Fleur Drive maintenance is A, it's not really our mission, right? But B, it was so, and is so dangerous work. You know, every time I drove by, especially on a weekday, there were Des Moines Waterworks employees out there working, I cringed. I mean, it was just, it's unsafe work. As Sue points out, I mean, it's one thing for us to take our employees out of harm's way there, but we are moving other people in there, and so I'm interested to see over time if moving into the weekends and that sort of thing helps.
Yes.
I'm also, you know, willing to go along with this kind of year experiment, if you will, to see how this works. You know, we get to the point where we're not getting the type of work product that we've gotten out of our employees in the past, or for some reason we begin to pay so much more, we're not doing this year, but over time spending more than we would pay our skilled workforce, then you're gonna have a problem for me. But, you know, I think that it's, as I say, I hate to see us outsource work like this, but in this case, it's such a troublesome piece of work for us that I think we need to do something.
Well, and I appreciate that was shared with the people we were bidding.
Yes.
That there were issues, that there are safety issues in doing it, and that they'll need to think about that when they perform that work.
I'm gonna assume that these aren't union workers.
I would say no.
I think so.
Small company, or a family company. One thing that I would say, Graham, is that this was not an easy choice for Jessica's folks either. They take great pride in what they do out there. And we had partnered with the city to provide police presence, which was improving our situation to the point where they actually felt safer and they questioned whether we should even try this or not, but the train was down the track a ways. And I think that it's an opportunity for us to understand how this would work, but it's not a lifetime commitment. If we believe that if you don't get the quality you need,
Or if there are safety concerns.
or if there are any kind of concerns, this is a one-year agreement. We can extend it if we determine that's appropriate. We can rebid it if that's appropriate, or we can end it and take over ourselves. So a lot of flexibility.
Absolutely. And Jessica, you'll do this anyway, so I'm not saying something that you're not already gonna do. I'm just saying it because this is a public forum, and I think we, as Des Moines Water Works, we wanna make sure that we put this out there. Since these contract employees won't be union employees, they don't have somebody that's watching out for them as an organization. I think we need to do that. And as I say, you're gonna do this anyway. I want you to make sure that these people are working in a safe environment and in a controlled environment, because that's on us. We can't rely on the union coming to us and raising a problem in this case. So, as I said, you're gonna do this anyway, but I look forward, and you should come back to us at any point if you feel that this company is not protecting their employees as they should.
I will.
And Graham, if I could just add to that, just a status update. I mean, this is new. I would much rather hear like quarterly updates on how it's going, the good and the bad. I mean, this is a high visibility, I think, issue for the board. So we'd love to hear from you on a quarterly basis with their feedback. And so when we are here a year from now, we'll have a good idea if it's for both.
We'll be doing a weekly maintenance schedule with them, so that'll be pretty easy to provide a quarterly update, so.
Thank you.
So this group would be implementing the plan that you shared with the planning committee, thank you.
I think the schedule is that everything that will be planted in 2020 will be in medians that haven't been impacted by construction. It will be the same style and design as exists today. So this particular contract will implement the same design that we've had historically.
And if we're gonna do this, I mean, this is a good time.
It's half as many medians.
Sure.
It is the same pattern that we've had historically.
Any other questions? It's been moved and seconded to execute the contractor agreement. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Any other? Jessica will get additional FaceTime with the board, which is something that I know everyone's.
Jessica.
Yeah. Review and approve identity theft prevention policy.
Yeah, this is something that historically we've done on a manual basis. I'm going to ask Amy to step up and kind of walk us through and then share some proposed changes in that approach.
Yeah. The identity theft prevention policy, hard to believe we drafted it 10 years ago. I still remember working with Rick to do that. And it was to comply with the red flag rule of the Fair and Accurate Credit Transaction Act. Quite a mouthful. The policy outlines procedures that Des Moines Water Works it takes to protect sensitive information for our customers and our employees, and what we should do if we feel like there is fraud occurring or if there has been a breach with sensitive information. And just some key examples of how we have implemented this policy and you know what some of those key security examples and procedures are. Unlike many utilities, Des Moines Water Works does not collect social security numbers. So customer social security numbers, we never ask for those, and it does affect our collections activities. We are unable to use some of the collection tools that are afforded to other utilities, like an income offset program that's run by the state, but we feel like it's the right thing to do, to not collect social security numbers. We also In order to protect our customers' identity, we will require a lease and ID from tenants who are trying to start service in an effort to make sure that that is the person whose name the service is going into and they say who they are, that they are who they say they are. Those were two, I would call them kind of the primary ways that we can protect our customers, but every day our customer service reps will flag transactions if something just doesn't feel right. And we may call a landlord to ask for more information. And we have found some of these situations just by the procedures that we employ. So we review this policy with our team annually in customer service. And since its inception, there's been language in the policy that says the board will review it annually. And last year, and so it is approved or has been in the past every January by this board. And after last January, Bill suggested to me that it probably made more sense, because it's a policy, a business policy, that it probably made more sense to fold it into our board policy manual and no longer have it come before the board every January. And so I made a note in my file, and that's what we're proposing today. And so what I have put in a red line in your board packets is just that we amend and restate the board policy manual to include this policy. We will continue to talk about it annually, train our employees on it annually. After the board materials were distributed, legal counsel in their review of the board packet had a couple other suggestions for revision that are pretty innocuous, but ensure that we continue to meet the Fair and Accurate Credit Transaction Act. And so if you'll allow me, I have the last page as a revision here that includes these additional revisions. Since the board, if approved, would not be reviewing the policy annually, these revisions indicate that a position, a senior management position, the Director of Customer Service and Marketing, is responsible for administering the policy and shall review compliance with the policy at least annually to make sure that that element of accountability still exists. And so this is the edits that we would propose are incorporated into the board policy manual.
Can I have a motion to approve the Des Moines Water Works identity theft prevention policy, which is in your packet, but as updated, as revised, and amend and restate the board in the board policy manual to incorporate that policy in section 6 business practices.
So moved.
Second.
So how often has this been changed or edited since it's been created?
I don't recall any edits since
Okay.
2009.
Thank you.
Right, I mean, it's fair to assume that this is something we're going to discuss, especially when we do our insurance renewal every year. We've been talking about,
The cyber.
cyber
Yeah.
type stuff. I mean, it's all kind of wrapped together.
It is. This is more comprehensive, I would
I
say,
would
because
agree.
this would also include face-to-face interactions in our
Right.
office. But yes, it
I mean,
is all wrapped together.
It's all wrapped together, and I think, if you read these edits, it makes it sound like we're not going to hear about this issue as often, because it replaces reporting to the Director of Customer Service annually as opposed to this board. But as far as I'm concerned, it's something that I think we will talk about quite a bit, because it's so important to us and our customers.
I would assume that if there were a breach, that we would be informed.
Sure.
So,
And the board does review the board policy manual from time to time too, and so it will be wrapped into that as well.
I had a couple questions, and they were on policy administration, and it's just how you do it. Who is it that you train on this? Just the customer service?
We do train the customer service team that is primarily working with the customer information HR is wrapped into this as far as the employee information that we maintain as well, but their processes are very sound in that regard.
And how do you do that training?
We talk about it in a team meeting and review the policy. They will ask questions in that training, or they have in the past. You know, what happens if, you know, this should happen? And again, certainly not significant security breaches, I would call them, but occasionally, you know, we'll have a customer who tries to open service with a fictitious lease. And so we're talking about those things every day as they occur. So we review the policy and just make sure that it's not put in a drawer for everyone to forget about.
My second question went to the final paragraph under policy administration. The utility shall ensure that the activities of service providers are conducted in accordance with reasonable policies. How do you implement that? I know the second one says that if the service provider has its own identity theft prevention program, then we consider that meeting.
Yeah, I think in those situations, those service providers, as Graham said, they're often system related, and so often this would be addressed in, you know, a response for a proposal or in a proposal for the job. We would talk about security and that sort of thing, the security of the system. We certainly did that for CIS. You know, what is the auditability of it? So I don't know that I could point to any formal questionnaire that I give to a service provider.
Yeah, I just wondered, since it says that if they don't have their own identity theft program, then we ensure that that their activities are conducted in accordance with reasonable policies.
Can I say, I think the primary impact would be the provider who does our credit card servicing, processing, and they are very definitely
Have their
at
own.
actually at a higher level than we could provide for that. All of these highly technical requirements that people dealing with credit card payments have to meet, which is one of the reasons why we kind of got out of the business. So to the extent we're dealing with a vendor in that area, they are
The
known to be experts and selected to be experts.
Okay, can we have a motion? Oh, we have a motion. Are there any additional questions? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The next item on the agenda is to discuss regionalization, and we'd like to going into closed session in order to have this discussion. Section 388.9, Parent 1, Code of Iowa allows a closed session to discuss marketing and pricing strategies and proprietary information that may impact the competitive position by public disclosure not required of potential or actual competitors related to ongoing negotiations over creating an integrated regional water authority. We propose to go into closed session to discuss, to avoid disclosure likely to prejudice or disadvantage the position of the Moines Water Works. Can I have a motion to go into closed session?
Someone.
Second.
And just to be clear, we haven't gone into a closed session to talk about regionalization for a while, right? I mean, it was, my memory serves, maybe early summer. I don't really remember.
Yeah, several months, it might have been September,
Maybe? Okay.
maybe.
And, you know, obviously, well, there's a meeting later this week, and that's part of the reason why we're doing this now.
Yes.
Good clarification.
Okay. Anything else?
Roll call vote.
Yeah.
Yeah, roll call vote, Michelle?
Sue Hubbard,
Yes.
Diane Munns,
Yes.
Graham Gillette,
Yes.
Andrea Bolton.
Yes. All right, we'll go back into open session. During the closed session period, we did not make any decision, so there are no actions to be reported. We'll remind everyone that there is a meeting on Thursday this week that we will notice as a public meeting, pursuant to legal requirements, and that we're receiving great response from the people who are invited to further the discussions on regionalization.
And Diane, that meeting is here at 4:45
4:45.
on Thursday.
Thursday this week.
Okay. And the next item for discussion, information items. Ted, do you have something you'd like to highlight?
We can,
Let's
zip
go through the board committee
reports.
reports first. Andrew, planning committee, do you have anything? I know you discussed the floor.
Yeah, we discussed the new palette and layout of various vegetation for the new floor medians, which is very exciting.
It's exciting.
I was excited to see it and look at it. I don't know if there's anything in particular that staff wants to add on that.
You know, just that we talked a little bit about the contracting and maintenance, and I think it's a great a refresh after 20 years of maintenance on Food Rock.
I think it will really help with all the things that we talked about with safety and being able to maintain that because of the vegetation that was selected for it, moving forward.
Any questions for Andrew? The finance and audit,
There's none.
we have a meeting. Customer relations,
Same.
Bill Stoll Memorial Committee.
We don't have a lot to report. We did meet again. We're looking for some sort of a rough proposal, if you will, from Country Landscapes on a proposal, and so look for that soon.
Botanical,
Not much reports there either. We haven't met as a board recently. The winter's a little slower over there. I guess I don't have it yet.
okay, foundation board,
There's information in the board packet from the foundation board. We've been delaying a strategic planning retreat for the past several weeks now due to weather. So
You keep planning it for Fridays, and that's when we get our snow.
Yep, exactly. So hopefully next time.
Andrea, could I share that the
Yeah.
Park Foundation Board was voted as the most
Absolutely.
outstanding nonprofit foundation in the city?
really?
Um,
I have to say, I've seen them in action, and I think that as far as next generation of leadership in Des Moines, I think you can go to that board and see that.
Chamber of Commerce select great honor.
That's nice. I hadn't heard that.
Laura, government.
Well, very briefly, as you know, the General Assembly of the state of Iowa gavelled in on January 13th and have been very active already the last couple of weeks. And most notably, I was up there yesterday for Water Day at the Capitol, and about a dozen of our service area legislators stopped by to say hello and talk about our issues, which is actually a pretty good number for a Monday morning because they don't gavel in until 1 p.m. So it was good to see them come in early and talk with us about water issues, water quality in the state. We already have a few bills that we are monitoring, none that really need board attention at this moment, but when things get moved out of subcommittees and committee meetings, we may have to take a more of a appropriate actions in formally registering for those. So stay tuned on those.
Thank you. Yeah, CEO and general managers.
Yes, today I wanted to share an update on our final update on our 2019 utility goals, and then share with you what our 2020 goals will be. You will recall that in 2019, we had a goal to limit recordable injuries to not more than 6, which would be about half of the industry average for our utility our size. We had a goal to reduce our line usage in the treatment process by 100 pounds per million gallons on average by targeting enhanced softening only during periods of time when that was absolutely necessary. And then we had a goal to complete some succession planning activities as we approach the vesting in IPERS, just to make sure that everyone was up to speed on what the rules and requirements there would be and how they would be impacted if they chose to retire. Unfortunately, related to safety, we had a goal of 6 and we ended up with 7 recordable injuries in 2019, so we did not meet the goal as stated. But one thing I want to share is this chart that does show the number of injuries we had in 2010 through 2014 versus the number of injuries we had in 2015 through 2019. 10 through 14, we averaged 16 injuries per year. And 15 through 19, we've averaged about 11. So that's positive movement. 7, while it didn't meet the goal, is still near half the industry average for us. It's a strong focus. It was a strong focus of Bill's. It will continue to be a strong focus going forward. But unfortunately, we did not meet that goal as written. The lime softening goal, you may remember from the last update that we were not making great progress on that goal, primarily because we were using a lot of groundwater from our infiltration gallery, which is positive, but that water tends to be harder. We did a little better in the last half of the year. We actually did meet the goal at the McMullen plant. We reduced our average lime usage by 128 pounds per million gallons. But unfortunately, at the Fluor plant, we didn't meet. We only reduced lime usage by 79 pounds because we produced so much more water at Fluor than at McMullen. The average was less than a 100-pound reduction. So again, we did not meet the goal as written. Ironically, because we had higher quality gallery water available to us. But we did still reduce lime usage compared to the 3-year average, enough to save on lime to the tune of about $120,000 for the year. So the goal is not met as written, but meaningful progress was made in both of those first 2 areas, I believe. The succession planning goal was met. We did have a number of employee interactions. We had some mandatory training for anyone who was eligible to retire so they could come and hear and understand just exactly what it meant to vest in IPERS. That was very good discussion. We had some optional retirement training. And then we also did get our distribution operator apprentice program approved through the Federal Department of Labor in 2019. So that should provide valuable training and opportunity for folks in distribution, similar to what we see in production at the apprenticeship program. So that is the report out on the 2019 goals. Any questions on those? Looking forward to 2020, we've got a number of fairly significant initiatives we're going to undertake in 2020, but we've identified 3 that we're going to focus on as goals. One of those is go live of the CIS project. We've talked about this for a couple of years now. It's a very important project, customer information, public-facing project that is very important to the utility and needs to go live. So we have fashioned a goal around completing that project and going live in 2020. Wholesale rate design is another critically important project for us in 2020. We do intend to work with Raftellus and complete our wholesale rate design, have a board work session so that we all understand where we're going, and then also wholesale customer workshops so that they'll understand what we're proposing and where we're thinking of going. And then thirdly, we're going to focus on lead water service lines. We know that we have a number of lead water service lines still remaining in the Des Moines system. We have not had issues with lead in drinking water because of very careful management of our water quality leaving the plant. But we're anticipating changes in the lead and copper rule that will require us to take several steps. And so we're going to try to take those steps in advance of the changes in the rule. We're going to try to map all of our lead service lines more accurately. We're going to develop some customer information materials that we can use to encourage customers to replace a lead service line if they do have one. And we are going to develop a lead service line replacement plan, which may or may not actually include replacement of the lines. We don't know. We're going to look into what the best management practices are and what we should do, what we can do, given that the customers actually own those lead service lines, not the utility. And so there's a nuance there.
Ted,
Yes.
how does a customer know if they have lead service lines?
You know, it isn't an easy thing to know. The best way is to call into customer service and ask what year their service was connected to our system.
Okay.
If their service was connected to our system prior to 1940, it's almost certain that they have a lead service line. If it was after 1950, it's almost certain that they do not have a lead service line, but there's that 10-year gap in there where it can kind of go either way. The lead does not come into the house, so you can't go and look at it. If you have a connection between 1940 and 1950, we can look at the size, we can look at some neighboring connections. We can do some things to get a good idea, but really the only sure way is to dig down and look at it.
So just to be clear for those people who are listening, Ted, when you say service line, you're talking about that line that runs from the street into your house.
That's correct.
I mean, just in case I'm
So generally, if your house was built in that time frame, if it was in your lot, chances are it wasn't a line.
Right, I mean, we have a house that was built in 1907. Now, we had our service line replaced
Right,
in 2006. So we know that ours isn't lead.
right.
We hold that information, and I think what you're talking about is us doing that identification, understanding where and how many, and I think we need to do that.
We're going to develop some specific criteria that will help us identify who does and who does not have a lead service line.
And
But
how many.
Customers can always call to customer service and just ask for help identifying whether they may or may not have a lead service. And we can go through a series of simple questions with them. Some we can be fairly certain do, some we can be very certain don't. A few may take a bit of additional investigation. But we're going to work on that this year. And we're not going to leave safety out this year either. We're going to continue our focus on safety with a little bit of a nuance. The same goal, 6 or fewer recordable injuries is our goal. That would be about half of the national average for utilities our size. We're also going to add in there, though, a specific focus in an injury area that's important to us, and we're going to actually let our Central Safety Committee identify what that area of focus should be. So we're going to meet with them. Don West is a member of that committee. Amy is a member of that committee. I'm probably forgetting Jenny is a member of that committee. We have a number of employees. We're going to let them determine what area we should focus on, and then we will focus very carefully on training, stretching, whatever the case may be to help us reduce those injuries. Slips, trips, and falls might be a candidate because we've had 2 already in January, one of which has resulted in a recordable injury already. So we're already at 1. It's been a tough January.
That's so
out there
hard.
with the
I mean, you
ice.
go through a winter where you don't have ice, then you don't have it, then you go through a winter like this where it's just a mess out there, and sometimes it's skating rink.
It's tough, but you know, we if that's our area of focus, there are a number of things we can do. We also have shoulder injuries is an area that we could consider focusing. Hearing loss is an area we could consider focusing. We're going to let the team decide, and we'll bring that back to you next month, let you know what they did decide, and hope that we can impact that specific area while still staying at 6 or fewer. Any questions about the goals for 2020? Very good. That's it.
The rest of the information was in your packet. If there's no questions, I entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Good.